A 50-person Thanksgiving gala in a $12 million estate produces a very specific kind of quiet when someone gets humiliated at the head table. Silver stops on china. 50 conversations hold their breath at once. Someone's chair creaks near the fireplace, and the creak carries the whole length of the hall. Eleanor stood at the head of the table she believed was hers, in the house she believed was hers, crystal glass raised, and finished her toast. And finally, to new beginnings. After tonight, we'll be rid of the little maid my son mistook for a wife, to taking out the trash before Christmas. She smiled down the table at me. Several guests laughed the thin, obedient laugh people give power. And Julian, my husband, 6 years, beautiful in candlelight the way expensive things are beautiful, slid a leather folder across the mahogany. It stopped against my wine glass. Divorce papers. He'd timed it for the toast. They'd rehearsed this, mother and son, the way they rehearsed everything except solvency. "You can keep the car," he said, warmly for the audience. "We're not cruel." I looked at the folder. I looked at Eleanor's raised glass, and at 50 faces waiting for me to cry, because crying was the only move a woman like me could possibly have. Instead, I took out my phone and sent a text I'd drafted 3 weeks earlier. One word: now. It takes 40 seconds to walk from the front gate to the Great Hall. I've timed it. It's my gravel. 40 seconds later, the oak doors opened, and a silver-haired man in a charcoal suit walked into the gala carrying a briefcase, and the room's attention swung to him like a compass needle finding north. "Good evening," said Mr. Vance. "I represent the owner of this house. Please don't stand." "I'm Maya, 32. I grew up over a hardware store, and I want that on the record first, because the Ashworths never let it off the record. My father sold hinges and pipe fittings for 40 years. What nobody in that dining hall knew, what my own husband never knew, is that my father also bought one very boring stock in 1989 and never sold. And when he died 4 years ago, quietly, the way he did everything, the brokerage statements that came to me had a number I had to read 6 times. $41 million. From hinges, patience, and never once needing to look rich. I told no one. Understand, that wasn't strategy at first. It was grief, and it was my father's voice in my head. Money talks loudest when it whispers. The inheritance went into a trust, the trust into the hands of my father's old attorney, Mr. Vance, and I kept living exactly as I'd lived. I was a project manager for a construction firm. I drove a Honda. I knew what things cost, down to the fitting, which is a superpower rich people never suspect exists. Julian Ashworth arrived in my life like weather. Old family, old estate, a name on a library wing. He was charming, and I've had 6 years to autopsy that charm, so here's the finding. Julian is charming the way a showroom is lit. Nothing in it is warm. It's engineered so you feel warm. But I was 30 and in love, and when he brought me to Ashworth House the first time, the hedges, the portraits, the hall with its stone fireplace you could stand in, he watched my face for awe. I gave it to him. That part was even real. Eleanor took one look at me and assigned me a caste. The humiliations were daily and ingenious, and the genius was deniability. My engagement ring examined through her reading glasses. How sensible. My name misremembered for the first year. Mara, Mia, the girl. And the tray. I want you to have the tray in full, because everyone gets one image, and this is mine. At their spring garden party, 2nd year, Eleanor pressed a silver drinks tray into my hands, guests watching, and said, "Take this around, dear. You blend in with the staff anyway. It's a gift, really," and laughed. And the guests laughed. And I took the tray around. I did it well. I've had actual jobs. I know how to work. and I told myself the lie that kept the whole marriage upright. They're just scared, proud people, and Julian's ego is a loading-bearing wall, and love means not kicking it. I was half right. It was loading-bearing. It just wasn't bearing what I thought. 3 years ago, the Ashworths went broke. Not trim the staff broke. Broke, broke. Julian father, Preston, had spent a decade making the classic old money error, assuming the name was collateral. He leveraged the estate to chase a friend's fund, which chased crypto, which chased zero. Then he refinanced to hide it, then borrowed against the refinance, and then, mercifully for him, died of a heart attack at his club, leaving Eleanor a portfolio of debts wearing a blazer. I found out by accident, a foreclosure notice I intercepted in the mail pile, addressed to the estate, stamped with the specific red ink that doesn't care about library wings. I stood in the marble foyer holding proof that the family that called me a maid couldn't cover their own heating oil. The auction was in 9 weeks. And here's the part of this story I've had to explain to every person who's heard it since, so let me just say it plainly. I saved them, on purpose, with my eyes open. Why? Because I loved Julian, and I watched him that autumn. He knew, of course, he and Eleanor were performing Serenity while quietly selling paintings, and I saw what losing the house would do to him, and I made a decision that I still think was generous, and I now know was also a test, even if I didn't admit that to myself. I would save the house without credit. No leverage, no gratitude, no debt of the heart. If I told them, Eleanor would owe the maid everything, and it would curdle into hatred by spring. So I'd do it silently and love them from inside the walls I paid for. Mr. Vance structured it clean. An anonymous LLC, held by my trust, bought the note and then the estate itself ahead of auction. $8.9 million, distressed price. I know what things cost. The paperwork the family received described a private investment group that had acquired the property and was pleased to grant the current occupants a residential arrangement, terms deferred. Eleanor announced to her circle that the family had restructured for tax purposes. Everyone's doing it. Julian never read past page 1. Reading past page 1 costs old money nothing, and they still won't pay it. So for 3 years, my in-laws lived rent-free in my house, mocking my poverty at my dinner table, under my roof, heated by oil I invoiced to myself. Eleanor handed me trays in my own great hall. I carried them, as the landlady. You're asking why I kept carrying them. Fair. The honest answer, the secret changed how the abuse landed. Every insult became almost anthropological. Fascinating. She's doing the tray thing again, in my house. I mistook that private irony for peace. It wasn't peace. It was inventory. I just didn't know what I was counting toward. Her name was Sasha, an heiress. Hotel money, allegedly, though having since seen her family's actual position, I can report the hotels are to and mortgaged, and there's a lesson in there about this entire social class. It's shells all the way down. I found out on an ordinary Tuesday in October. Julian's phone, charging on the kitchen island, lit up while I was making coffee. No snooping, just a lock screen doing its job. Sasha, counting down till the house is ours. Ours. I didn't touch the phone. I made the coffee, and that evening when he left it again, arrogance makes people careless, why guard anything from the maid, I read the thread. 20 minutes, cup in hand, leaning against my own counter. 4 months of affair, plans in detail, and then the message that performed the exact function in my heart that a breaker performs on a circuit. Sasha had asked, "What about Maya?" and my husband had written back, "Relax, I'm dumping the charity case after Mom's Thanksgiving thing. She gets nothing, no prenup needed when the wife owns nothing, lol." Mom wants to make a whole moment of it. Then you move in. The house deserves a woman that matches it. I want to describe the moment precisely because people expect fire, and what happened was the opposite. I read Charity Case and felt the love, 6 years of it, real, expensive, carried like a tray, leave my body all at once. Not break, leave, like a tenant, honestly. It gave notice, packed, and was gone between one sip of coffee and the next. What remained was a clean, empty, well-lit space. And into that space walked my father's daughter, who knows what things cost. The house deserves a woman that matches it. Julian, my love, on that single point, full agreement. The next morning I was in Mr. Vance's office. He's 71, courtly, and he'd been waiting 3 years to have this meeting. He told me later he'd kept the file on his credenza, not in the cabinet. We went through it properly because it had to be airtight, not theatrical. Well, airtight and theatrical. The facts were almost embarrassingly clean. The estate, mine, bought before any of this, held by my separate trust, funded by inheritance, untouchable, unmarital, uncomplicated. The Ashworths' status, not tenants. They'd never paid a cent, never signed a lease. The residency arrangement was a revocable license from the LLC, deliberately left informal by the landlady who left them. Licenses, Mr. Vance explained, can be revoked. The divorce Julian planned to serve me, welcomed. Frankly, Vance said, tapping the folder, your husband is about to file the paperwork that ends his housing, and I've been practicing law for 46 years, and I've never seen a man serve himself an eviction. One instruction from him, and I followed it to the letter. Do nothing early. Change nothing. If they're planning a public moment at Thanksgiving, let them build the stage. We'll only need it for 4 minutes. So I baked the pies. I always baked the pies. Eleanor tells people the cook does it. Which returns us to the gala, the toast, the folder against my wineglass, the word now, the oak doors. 40 seconds. Mr. Vance walked the length of that hall at a pace I can only call unhurried by design, past 50 of the Atlantic seaboard's most flammable gossips, and stopped at the head table. Eleanor, mid-triumph, glass still raised, regarded him the way she regards all known men over 60, potential donor or lost caterer. Madam, apologies for interrupting the toast, though I'm told it concerned this house, so perhaps it's fitting. My name is Arthur Vance. For 3 years I have represented Meridian Hollow LLC, the owner of record of this property. He set his briefcase on the table, opened it, and produced a document with a county seal. The deed, recorded 3 years ago this month, following the foreclosure proceedings initiated against the late Preston Ashworth's debts. The word foreclosure, spoken aloud, in that room, did more damage than anything else all night. 50 guests inhaled at once. Eleanor's glass came down so fast it slopped wine onto the linen. That is a private, our finances were restructured, and Vance said, pleasantly, yes, madam, by my client, who has also since then paid the property taxes, the insurance, the heating oil, and I confirmed this line item personally, the recent repair of the fountain you drove a golf cart into. My client has housed this family gratis for 3 years. Julian, to his credit, was faster than his mother. Real fear is clarifying. Who, he said, is your client? Mr. Vance turned the deed's trust page around and set it in front of them, and I watched 2 generations of Ashworths read my full legal name at the same moment. Maya Elizabeth O'Coffer Ashworth, sole beneficiary. The silence lasted 4 full seconds. Eleanor looked at the deed, then at me, then, and this is the detail I'll keep until I die, the silver tray on the sideboard as her brain replayed 3 years at hyperspeed and arrived at the garden party. Her mouth opened. Nothing was in it. "You're standing in my wife's house," I said to no one in particular, quietly from my end of the table. "Sorry, force of habit. You're standing in my house. The wife part expires whenever he files that folder." Julian grabbed for the divorce papers reflexively to retract them physically, as if unsliding the folder could unslide the evening, and Vance produced 2 envelopes with the serenity of a man dealing a hand he'd stacked years ago. "Mr. Ashworth, Mrs. Ashworth, notice of revocation of your license to occupy, effective immediately, with vacancy required within 24 hours. As unpaying guests rather than tenants, that is the extent of the process you're owed. Though my client, being who she is, has arranged and prepaid a suite at the Fairmont for 14 days, and professional movers for your personal effects. Personal effects," he repeated gently, "are itemized in Schedule B. The paintings convey with the house. They were collateral, page 4. Eleanor sat down, missed the chair's center, caught the arm, made it look almost voluntary. Almost. And Julian looked across 50 guests at me and tried the smile, the showroom lighting, one last time, flickering on emergency power. "Maya, sweetheart, obviously this changes the conversation." "It doesn't. It just changes whose staff clears the table. Take the car. I'm not cruel." 50 elite guests cannot leave a gala quickly, and they cannot leave quietly, and God knows they cannot leave without their phones out. The exodus took 40 minutes and produced, by my count, 1 fender bender in the drive, 3 "we should get lunch" lies to my face from women who'd laughed at the Maid toast, and a story that reached 3 states before the pies I'd baked went cold. Old money's actual currency is narrative. Last night I sat by the great stone fireplace, the one you can stand in, with a glass of wine my father would have called overpriced, and then finished. The house makes sounds at night I never let myself love before. The oak settling, radiators ticking, 300 years of other people's certainty going quiet around one hardware man's daughter. People ask if it's lonely, one woman in $12 million of empty rooms. Here's my answer. For 6 years I lived crowded by contempt, by performance, by a tray that kept landing in my hands. The rooms were full, and I was invisible in every one of them. Now the rooms are empty, and I'm the only thing in the house that was ever actually worth what it cost. The heating oil, incidentally, is still invoiced to me. Some bills I've grown sentimental about.